right, this week we're talking about gimbals. Cary, what's your thought on gimbals?
I don't like hate gimbals. I mean, they're a lie, but I don't hate them.
They're a whoa, they're a lie. Okay, let's talk about it. So I've reviewed a few gimbals in my time. I've used them less than I've reviewed them. That's an interesting fact. I think in my corporate work, a lot of times I'm up on sticks. You know, they got the camera on sticks. So, but there is time to time we'll do what I often refer to as walkie talkies. So
Yep.
we'll have someone walking and talking at the same time. So we'll do some of those. I think those can work okay for gimbals because what you have is you have a picture where the obvious focus is on the person talking. So
Sure.
you're not seeing all of the movement that the gimbal is not necessarily compensating for. I think that works okay.
True.
Another thing that I really love gimbals for is for doing shots where I'm standing in one spot
Uh-huh.
and doing kind of simulating a crane shot.
Yeah,
Sometimes I put it on the end of a monopod and actually
totally.
use it like a crane. I think that's pretty cool.
That's a cool way to use it. I like that.
But I think that if you're going to go walk through some building and there's no person in the frame, it's going to be kind of a mess. You're going to see the
Yeah.
walking.
Well, I think even to rewind a little bit, there's a few things to consider though about a gimbal. So a prime example, and this is personal for me and you. You have a Panasonic GH5, right? And the image stabilizer in that is awesome, right? And the GH4, which also
It
is an
is.
awesome camera that I have, the image stabilizer in it is not awesome. And so you can put both of those cameras on the same gimbal and you're going to get a totally different result. So it's important to do a lot of research beforehand to make sure the weight ratio is right for the gimbal you're buying, but also the stabilization that's already in the camera, because that makes a huge difference. That's why you see these Facebook ads for these gimbals you can throw your iPhone on and go sprinting down the road and have these silky smooth shots. Well, the stabilizers in an iPhone, some crazy large percentage of R&D for each new phone, and I think it's the same thing with Android, goes into image stabilizers in the camera. So if you have good stabilization in the camera, a gimbal is going to be a lot more useful than certain cameras that don't. I think some people think I'll get a gimbal, I'll put my camera on it, and I'll be making like just crazy awesome movies. And the problem is that they might be getting better shots, but their movie would probably be more crazy awesome if it had a good story and just some thoughtful shooting over a $6,000 gimbal.
I completely agree, and I think that's brings up an interesting point. I think really for camera movement, that is putting the camera on the gimbal and moving it around, or other ways of moving it, whether it be sliders, whatever other things, jibs.
Yeah.
The reality is there needs to be a motivation for that. There needs to be something that you know as part of telling your story, if there's a reason to move the camera that helps heighten the story or helps draw the viewer in better or something along those lines, then I think it's useful.
Absolutely.
But if you're just doing movement for movement's sake, I think you're missing the mark and you're spending your money in the wrong place.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we've talked before, good audio, good lighting, creative ideas. There's so many things that come before that. And then there's also the good old fashioned Steadicam. And I don't own a gimbal. I have owned a gimbal, but I don't. And I actually have a fairly inexpensive, I think it's a glide gear vest sort of setup with an arm. And the disadvantage is you can't have a locked horizon with that. Like you've got to stay on that. You get it balanced, you can get pretty close, but something like, for example, we've talked about how I do real estate videos. It's not really useful in a real estate video because it's all about straight lines. But you have that fourth axis. You have that big giant spring arm that makes things feel human, which is more how, like, when you're walking, you don't walk like this. You walk like this. And it just, to me, a vest with an arm and gravity and weight feels more natural. And again, we do have conversations where I just talk about gimbals being the biggest lie in the film business, and they're not. There's absolutely a time and a place, and I've seen awesome shots with them, but don't think that it's going to be the end all be all. Invest in, like, there's inexpensive jibs you can get that would be cool. Put them on a little dolly. I sometimes will use one of those hoverboard things and with my vest, and then I can make these sort of pseudo dolly shots if it's on the right surface. practice being steady with your hands too. I mean, obviously you're probably not going to walk with a camera no matter how good the image stabilizer is, but I think for me personally, and this is just the younger Judd brothers saying this, I think that a gimbal is, I think they're kind of overused. It's kind of when drones became really accessible and everyone had to have a drone. And drones, you can get great shots, great like setup scenes. You know, there's a time and a place for it. But it seems like everyone's rushing out to get a gimbal, and it seems like a billion companies have popped up making the new best gimbal, and they're all the same thing. And I think until gimbals start incorporating a fourth axis more commonly, I probably won't buy one personally, unless I have a very specific reason for it.
I think another thing that people kind of get hung up on too is that when they go out and get a gimbal that has a larger carrying capacity, but then because what they want to do is they want to put a microphone up on top of their camera and make that their run and gun rig. Just a thought on that. What I would recommend is instead of mounting the microphone on top of your camera, if you're going to do this, I would mount it on the bottom of the handle instead. So you don't have to, have the gimbal working extra hard to maintain that weight. Just a thought, just something to experiment with.
Yeah, and actually that's another good point. I've seen a company, I can't remember their name, but they've come out with this thing. It's like a gimbal handle, and it basically attaches to the handle so that you can put accessories, you can put a screen down there, so the gimbal isn't carrying that extra weight and isn't being spun in different directions, because you still have to balance a motorized gimbal, and it's not too hard. I mean, I guess if you've balanced a Steadicam, balancing a gimbal is really easy, but it is something you still have to take time with. You still got to learn how to walk, and you still won't have that fourth axis, that up down bounce thing. You're still going to get wag in a lot of scenarios. Is that the right word? Is wag a real word? I always call it wag.
I don't know. I think it fits really nicely, though. I'd call it
like
wag.
Screen goes.
I'm digging that name. I think another thing that you don't realize, or when you're first getting into gimbals, another thing you'll notice if you watch the reviews out there on YouTube or anywhere else, what you'll often see is overcranked image that they've reconformed to a lower frame rate in post. So everything automatically gets smoothed out even more. So don't be deceived. Yeah. Don't be deceived by that. Don't be thinking, oh, it's buttery smooth right out of, I don't have to do anything. I just put my camera on there, balance it, and I go and I get everything buttery smooth. No, the reality is you're still going to see a bunch of bouncing around and movement in there. And if you want to do those slow motion shots, that's very cool. They have a really cool look to them, but it needs, again, to be lending itself to the story. It needs to make sense for the story if you're going to do that. And in some cases, that's not really the case.
And I'm like, even now I'm trying to think, I've been formulating this question, like, what do you think is a good reason, or what's a good gig? I don't know. What's a good scenario where you really should have a gimbal? I mean, a travel video, maybe, an action, I think an action movie,
I think a travel video.
A lot of that you could do with a Steadicam as well. And for me, it just comes down to, like, I like using the gravity, the glide cam, the Steadicam type of thing. And the only time I've ever wanted a gimbal, and I don't think that I can either find one or afford one for my bigger camera, would be for doing real estate. And it's just as well for me to set up a jib in each corner, move to the next corner, and kind of move my way through the house that way, or use a slider, which you can get, fairly robust sliders for not a lot of money too. So.
I agree. It's interesting. I have a PVC homemade gimbal that I made years ago, absolutely years ago. And I actually think that for walking shots, I get smoother shots with that than I do with most three-axis motorized gimbals. And I think it's because it's weighted. And so as you walk, the weight helps smooth out the walking.
Interesting.
And that's what I think you're getting on a Steadicam that you're not necessarily getting on a motorized gimbal. So
yeah.
I've actually used that in some of my corporate pieces with the smaller cameras. Again, it's like a GH4, GH5 kind of thing. But I actually do walkie-talkies with that and get pretty good results. And in fact, I don't think the results are any worse, probably a little bit better than most motorized gimbals.
Interesting. Have you ever done a tutorial on how to build one of those?
No.
You should do one for your reel channel.
I should. And I love it when people give me unsolicited advice.
I'm going to go make a fake YouTube name and leave comments and heckle you.
I'm just kidding. It's a good point. I should probably do that.
You'd be a freaking hero, man.
think-
You'd be saving so many people $800.
That being said, they are useful, and I do use them. I have the Zhiyun Crane 2. I really like that one. That one is a really kind of just a nice overall gimbal that works really nicely. Again, I'm mostly going to be using it for establishing shots, crane shots, B-roll, things like that.
And that one looks
so
awesome.
that's
I've seen
really
your footage
for
on that,
me.
and it does genuinely look awesome. I'm just for some reason tonight I feel like I'm playing devil's advocate. I don't like hate gimbals. I mean, they're a lie, but I don't hate them. But they're a lot. No, there's a time and a place. Just spend your money on some other things though. Like we always do go back to lighting and good sound. And then for me, it's creativity's first. If it's not a good story, if it's not a good script, it's just a polished turd that you shot on your Ronin.
Exactly right. I think that's good for gimbals.
Okay, cool.
Thanks,
Let's leave
bro.
it at that. We're gonna get some hate mail for this one, I bet.